DeAndre Hopkins traded to the Cardinals for David Johnson and other considerations on this episode of the Fantasy Football Fallout. All right, everybody, so let me just start with this. I don't like this trade at all for Houston. I think I understand why they might have done it, and I'll get to that, but let me tell you why I don't like it first, okay? First of all, I think DeAndre Hopkins is clearly a top 5 wide receiver in the league. He's the only receiver I've seen over the last few years that can perform with any quarterback in the league. Now, you can make an argument that Julio's great, and he is, and like Odell Beckham, everybody talks about him, but remember when Eli Manning, kind of went out of the lineup, even Odell Beckham, Odell Beckham suffered. You get DeAndre Hopkins performing with Tom Savage and TJ freaking Yates. Okay, he can put up numbers with anybody out there. You put him on Arizona's team, who is obviously a pass-first team. Now they have Larry Fitzgerald coming back in 2020, and they have Christian Kirk as a trio. I don't know that there's a better trio in the league. You look at the Rams. Certainly, their trio of Woods and Kupp and Cooks is intriguing, but then you look at Cooks and he kind of degraded after last year. This is going to be a very, very good team, and all Arizona really had to do is give up a second-round pick and David Johnson, who was a declining asset. Now, I talked about David Johnson. If you watched my running backs, you should target and buy low on towards the end of last season. Everybody dogged me about David Johnson. I said he's going to land on a good team because he's too good not to get an opportunity with the team somewhere else. But you can check out that video. There are still some others out there that might ascend. Now, Arizona, of course, you lose David Johnson, who had fallen kind of out of favor over the last couple seasons, I think for a number of reasons, not the least of which a couple of transitioning offenses, the weakening of the offensive line. They just weren't really using him. They got Kenyon Drake in the middle of last year. They like him. Are they going to re-sign him as of the recording this video? We'll see. But I like Chase Edmonds as well. I mean, they're going to be able to find somebody that can get in this system that is heavily pass predicated. They're going to find somebody that's going to be able to run for 4.5 to 5 yards per carry, and it's not David Johnson, and that was a huge contract, so I get that. I like David Johnson, but like I said, giving him up and getting DeAndre Hopkins back is awesome. There's no question in my mind that the Houston Texans got worse with this trade. I don't know what's going to happen to their passing game at this point. Hopkins was the one I think that made it go. Now, you can argue, Deshaun Watson's obviously great, and I do think that long-term, why I'm trying to figure out why this makes sense, I have two reasons. One, DeAndre Hopkins is, I think, kind of a difficult guy to deal with off the field. Not to say he gets in trouble or anything, but I think he's more difficult in terms of wanting to hold out, always wanting kind of like a little bit more money. Julio Jones is kind of like that as well. And some of these really good receivers who can produce at that level, you can kind of understand where they're coming from. But Houston, the other reason I think this makes a lot of sense, and by the way, Houston runs the ball well. They ran the ball well with the hodgepodge of Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson last year, who they had to trade a little bit for those guys too. So they're giving up too much draft capital, guys. They really are. A couple years ago, even Lamar Miller was getting over 4 yards a carry. They're not a bad team running the ball. They can produce, but now they have a guy who can stay on the field for 3 downs, and that's going to be very helpful, I think, to the entire Texans team. But what concerns me is now who's Deshaun Watson going to throw to? Will Fuller, he can't stay on the field. Houston does not have a first-round pick. Thankfully for them, it's a deep wide receiver draft, so maybe they can find somebody in the second round to kind of replace DeAndre Hopkins, but this is rough. I think Houston definitely took a significant step behind the Tennessee Titans, who recently signed Ryan Tannehill, and they also, just franchised Derrick Henry. So they're going to be coming back a little bit intact. I know there are some other key pieces, some depth players that are going to be there. Will Fuller not being able to stay on the field, what are you going to do? Throw the ball to Kenny Stills, Kiki QT, who has already fallen out of favor? Come on, give me a break. This does free up the Arizona Cardinals, by the way, to draft an offensive lineman. I have not released it yet, but my next mock draft, which includes basically feedback from all the big Reddit boards for every team, they actually were going heavy towards wide receiver. Now, obviously, they don't have to do that. So you can get Kyler Murray, who already has these 3 fantastic wide receivers. You can get him more support in the offensive line. I think that's important as well. It also gives them insulation whenever Larry Fitzgerald retires. We'll see when he does. But, I think this offense is going to get a little bit more fun, and I think Arizona will have Fitzgerald back as long as he wants to play. And that's the key, as long as he wants to play. Christian Kirk, like I said before, you got Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, DeAndre Hopkins. on that receiving core. You got Kyler Murray, who I think the only knock on him is that he's about 2 or 3 inches shorter than Russell Wilson. I mean, he's fantastic. He has an arm. He has escapability from the pocket. He is basically the epitome, outside of height, which is a fair criticism. He is the epitome of what an NFL quarterback is going to be like over the next 10 years. He's going to be kind of, again, if it weren't for the height, the prototype, right? But he threw the ball well, and he was able to find windows to throw. He was able to throw all over the offensive line. He was able to push the ball downfield. They didn't just do those quick outs like they were doing earlier in the season. I see Arizona. Look, difficult division. You got Seattle, you got San Francisco, both in the playoffs last year. If there was a 7th seed back last season in 2019, the Rams would have been in the playoffs too. That's 3 playoff teams had they had the full 7 playoff slots, which we'll probably get this year. We'll see if they implement from the new CBA. But this is a team that needed to find stars. I think they made a great move. They basically swap 4th-round picks. They give up a 4th round, but they get one back in a future year. Or maybe they get a 4th rounder this year and then give one next year. I can't remember the year breakdown, but it really, again, a depreciating asset. Basically what they did was they got rid of a contract. I hear Houston is going to be paying the salary of DeAndre Hopkins, and they give up just a 2nd-round pick for that kind of talent. Wonderful trade for Arizona. Houston, I think they're putting themselves in a position to get Deshaun Watson under a big, long extension, which they should do. I would think that they will make that happen sooner rather than later. I think that the earlier these days you sign a quarterback, the better, the less expensive it'll be over the next few years. And you want to sign Deshaun Watson before remember, new collective bargaining agreement, before the gambling money starts hitting the salary cap. Once that happens, the cap's going to jump. The percentage for quarterback is also going to jump pretty high as well. So if you can get like a 5-year lock on one of these fantastic quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson is, I think it makes sense. That's the only way this trade makes sense to me, is if they lock up, and they're very aggressive in locking up Deshaun Watson. So we'll see what happens. But congratulations to the Cardinals. Houston, you're going to need that 7th seed to be implemented this year to make the playoffs. I'm sorry. That's just how I see it, all things aside. So Deshaun's great, but I need to see an answer at wide receiver. You can't just be dumping the ball off to David Johnson every single play. So that's how I see it. This is the Fantasy Football Fallout. If you agree, disagree, whatever, please like, subscribe, and more importantly, comment. What do you think the record is going to be for the Houston Texans this year? Off the top of my head, I'm going to say 7-9 in the 2020 season, but we'll see. Thanks everybody for watching. Catch us again soon.